You might think kids these days have it tough, between school, homework, and screen time overload. But Amish children? By the time they hit 10, they've mastered skills most city adults wouldn't dare try. We're talking full-on farm routines at 4:30 a.m., fixing broken gear with hand tools, cooking for a family of 10, and running roadside businesses with no electricity, no shortcuts, and no complaints. These kids grow up off-grid, hands-on, and heart-deep in a culture that values real-world know-how over modern convenience. In this video, we're going deep into the incredible world of Amish childhood, what they learn, how they live, and why these old-school lessons might just be the survival skills the rest of us forgot. Number 1. Pre-dawn livestock routine. By the time most kids are still in bed dreaming, Amish children are already in the barn, well before sunrise. At 4:30 a.m., while it's still dark and cold enough to freeze bucket lids, these kids are up, dressed, and working. Even at 5 years old, they've already learned how to latch a stall gate tight enough to keep a curious calf from nosing it open. Milking cows, usually Jersey or Dexter breeds, is done entirely by hand, using the same strip-squeeze finish rhythm their elders taught them by demonstration, not by instruction. They use a warm iodine solution to clean the teats before and after every milking, a preventive measure that stops mastitis before it starts. The milk is strained through double-folded cheesecloth directly into stainless pails that are never set on the barn floor. 9-year-olds can disassemble and wash the cream separator over 30 delicate discs in scalding hot water without hesitation. They know their feed formulas by heart: 50% cracked corn, 30% oats, 20% granite grit for laying hens. Candle eggs with a kerosene lantern? They do that too, weeding out any with cracks. Hogs get water through a float valve, and every morning kids jiggle it to make sure the flow isn't frozen. Diatomaceous earth gets scattered in the hens' dust baths to naturally kill mites, and the daily milk yield from each cow is marked in chalk on the barn wall. If a number dips, that's a sign of illness. Manure? It's scraped, wheelbarrowed, and pitched onto a compost pile that will feed next spring's crops. They learn the warmth of an udder can hint at infection. They trim goat hooves every 6 weeks, knowing the exact angle to prevent lameness. After chores, warm milk is ladled out for the barn cats, not because they're pets, but because rodent control builds real empathy. The stall floors get dusted with lime to cut ammonia, protecting the lungs of animals and humans alike. With a soft voice cue like, "So now," kids settle skittish heifers, and they rotate pasture gates to avoid overgrazing. Their hoof knives are sharp enough to shave arm hair, because a dull blade means a hurt animal and a financial loss. Even lantern wicks are trimmed just right to avoid soot buildup. 5-gallon pails are carried across narrow planks. One spill means more work and wasted milk. They record butterfat percentages and compare them to grain prices, learning early that biology and economics go hand in hand. They know that if clover roots are exposed, cows need to be moved. And if a teat cracks, a dab of iodine saves the paycheck down the line. They whistle German hymns to keep the barn calm, because cortisol hurts milk production, and clamp pipe stanchions tight. One loose head can wreck a 1,200-pound hallway. The rule is simple: if you skip feed today, you lose weight on market day. Tools are scrubbed with vinegar to prevent milkstone, and by 6:30 a.m., chores are done, and it's time for breakfast and school. The deeper lesson: animal health equals family income, and excuses don't count. Number 2, kitchen garden and seed literacy. In the Amish world, gardening starts with your hands in the soil long before spring hits the calendar. Kids are taught to test spring soil using the crumble test. Scoop a fistful, and if it breaks apart instead of smearing, it's planting time. Beds are prepped with a horse-drawn single-bottom plow, often with a kid guiding the reins while a parent works the blade. Aged horse manure gets spread in March, carefully forked under so it doesn't burn seeds. Carrot trenches are double-dug 12 inches deep to ensure straight roots. Rows are measured using baling twine pulled taut between stakes. Sweet corn is only planted when the lilacs bloom, a phenology trick older than most textbooks. Lettuce is reseeded every 10 days, turning a harvest into a math routine. Kale seeds get mixed with sand for even broadcasting, preventing overcrowding. Cold frames made from old windows harden tomato starts before the last frost. Kids wake up early to hand-pick potato beetles into kerosene cans. No sprays, just vigilance. Garlic pepper tea gets boiled in old enamel pots to spray aphids off cabbage curls. They're taught to recognize ladybug larvae so they don't squish the good bugs. Mulch goes down around tomatoes to retain water and prevent soil splash that spreads blight. Pole beans are trained up corn stalks in a perfect example of the Three Sisters method. Marigolds grow along borders to deter nematodes. Kids can smell the roots and know that scent means defense. Rain barrels feed gravity-fed drip tape, teaching kids siphon physics the hard way by getting soaked. Germination rates go in spiral notebooks, pairing math with botany. When bean pods rattle dry, they're shelled and saved in labeled mason jars, often with the family name and year marked Hinkle 2025. Seeds dry on screens for 2 weeks, never on paper that holds moisture. Root cellars stay at 55 degrees Fahrenheit, the sweet spot for storage. Kids swap seeds with cousins at quilting bees, keeping both biodiversity and family ties strong. Crop rotation is mapped on wall calendars to prevent next year's blight. Sweet potato slips are sprouted in heated sand and watered with a copper dipper. They learn to feel soil moisture with a finger joint test. Dry to the second knuckle means it's time to water. They tie praying mantis egg cases to tomato stakes to protect garden allies. Surplus rhubarb gets sold by the roadside in spring. Early pocket money for green thumbs. And by calculating row feet of potatoes, family size times weekly need times winter weeks, they grasp food security. Compost temperatures are checked with a thermometer to kill pathogens, and a dusting of rock powder enriches carrot beds with micronutrients. The last walk through the plot is to count earthworms, because healthy soil to them means next year's food. Number 3, scratch cooking and bread sense. In Amish kitchens, children don't just help with cooking, they become masters of it before they hit double digits. At dawn, they feed sourdough starters with exact ratios of flour and water, watching bubbles rise like a living science experiment. They don't need timers. Shadows moving across the windowsill or the scent of yeast tell them it's time to knead. By heart, they know the 4-2-1 ratio for biscuits. 4 parts flour, 2 fat, 1 liquid. They test dough elasticity using the window pane test, stretching it until light passes through without tearing, feeling gluten form beneath their fingertips. Their ovens are wood-fired, so heat is judged by holding a hand near the door. 3 seconds equals about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. No digital readouts, they grease pans with homemade lard and render chicken fat for dumplings. Flour is milled from whole berries using hand-cranked grinders, and they taste protein levels instead of reading nutrition labels. Green beans are pressure canned at exactly 11 CI for 25 minutes. Numbers etched into memory, not printed on cheat sheets. Apple butter simmers in copper kettles, stirred by hand with hickory paddles to avoid scorching. Kids recognize jelly readiness by the cold plate test. If it wrinkles, it's done. They ferment sauerkraut in 10-gallon crocks, thumping lids to listen for gas buildup. A 10-year-old might bake 8 loaves of bread alone while their mother is outside sorting peaches. The knowledge passed down through generations isn't just about making food, it's about understanding fermentation, emulsification, preservation, and thrift. They wash dishes in a 3-basin system. Wash, rinse, bleach, not because it's trendy, but because it's effective. These cooking routines become second nature, shaping how they view time, chemistry, and nutrition. No frozen meals, no microwaves, no takeout. Just raw ingredients transformed with skill and precision, long before they ever hear the word culinary. Number 4, needlework and fabric economy. By the time Amish kids are old enough to write their names, they've already sewn a button and mended a seam. It starts early, around age 4, with threading a needle using the lip pinch method and practicing simple stitches on scrap fabric. They begin with the running stitch and quickly move to hemming, darning, and piecing 9-patch quilt squares that require careful math, 3.5-inch cuts that finish as perfect 3-inch blocks. Ironing with sad irons heated on the stove teaches both heat safety and patience. They learn how to follow the grain of the fabric to avoid puckering and ensure every dress or shirt hangs properly. Feed sacks, once used for livestock grain, are washed, bleached, and turned into aprons and dresses. Socks are darned over wooden eggs, and worn-out clothes are repurposed into rag rugs, quilt batting, or dishcloths. Beeswax rubbed on thread prevents tangles, and hem gauges made from marked sticks replace store-bought rulers. Even patterns are hand-drawn on recycled butcher paper. Solid colors dominate clothing due to the Ordnung rules, and kids know to avoid flashy prints. They repair harness blankets with upholstery needles, merging sewing skills with livestock care. A child might crochet dishcloths in winter evenings, knit mittens on 4 needles, or piece together church dresses using hooks instead of buttons. They know the difference between cotton for towels and wool for warmth. Every fabric scrap has a second life, proof that nothing is wasted. These sewing lessons aren't just about clothes. They're about independence, resourcefulness, and preserving a culture one stitch at a time. Number 5. Workshop basics and tool respect. Before Amish kids are allowed to use hand tools, they learn to identify them just by their silhouettes. A tri-square held to light should reveal no gaps. Precision is drilled into them early. Block planes are set to produce paper-thin curls, and bow saws get new blades swapped out in seconds. They learn to saw just to the waist side of a pencil mark, because the kerf, the width of the blade, matters when measuring. Chisels are sharpened at 25 degrees on waterstones, and peg joints are pounded flush with mallets, not brute force. No power tools are involved. A brace and bit drill creates perfectly round holes, and kids feel the torque in their wrists as it bites into wood. Screw heads must sit flush. Snagged cloth means shoddy work. Hide glue is simmered to 145 degrees Fahrenheit, used instead of modern adhesives. They learn to plane with the grain to avoid tearing wood fibers, and sand to a smooth 120 grit finish. Bent nails aren't trash. They're straightened and reused. Even pine shavings are swept into feed sacks for chicken bedding. Every measurement, every cut, and every joint is double-checked by touch and eye. Safety isn't an afterthought, it's built into every movement. Dull blades are dangerous, so sharpening is part of the routine. Amish kids know how to fix, build, and create using simple tools and sharp minds. By age 10, they've likely built their own bench or birdhouse and know exactly how much wood it takes to frame a shed. Their pocket notebooks log board feet, sketch joints, and jot ideas. Not for fun, but because memory fades and pencil marks don't. Number 6. Horse handling and road awareness. Long before they're tall enough to drive a buggy alone, Amish children are learning the ins and outs of horse care and road safety. Grooming starts every morning with a curry comb to remove dust that could cause harness sores. Hooves are cleaned out before hitching, because one stone today means a lame horse tomorrow. The britchin strap on the harness must sit just right. Not too high, not too low. They memorize how to attach chains to the single tree, checking that there's no slack that could snap in motion. Kids learn voice cues. G for right, haw for left, and whoa to stop. All without reins at first. Slow-moving vehicle triangles and reflective tape are attached to every buggy, and lantern wicks are trimmed to avoid soot buildup that could blind night vision. They practice emergency stops by dropping the reins, bracing their feet, and calling out. Grain rations are measured by volume, not weight, and pasture rotation schedules are followed to reduce parasite loads. On the road, they start as passengers, calling out hazards before ever taking the reins. They know midday asphalt can soften a horse's shoes, so routes are adjusted. Rein length is measured to match seat back height, and if one reins longer, the horse will twist. Every 30 seconds, they glance back for traffic. Situational awareness is constant, and before every ride, they whisper a prayer, not just for safety, but as a quiet reminder that humility is the first rule of the road. Number 7, two-tongue fluency and story memory. In the Amish world, bilingual isn't a goal, it's simply the norm. From birth, children grow up hearing Pennsylvania Dutch at home and English in school and with outsiders. Breakfast conversations are in Dutch, but if an English neighbor stops by, they switch seamlessly. Hymns are sung in High German, especially Lob Lied, which has over 90 verses. Kids memorize these by the time they're 10, not just the words, but the cadence and emotion. Luther Bibles in High German are read daily, even if it's just a few verses. Tourists at roadside stands often hear impeccable English greetings, followed by laughter and chatter in Dutch as soon as they walk away. Children code switch naturally, using Dutch to tell jokes their English friends won't understand, and English to explain schoolwork to younger siblings. Idioms are learned in both languages. What one might call make hay while the sun shines is schafs aes licht is in their world. They learn to write thank you notes in cursive English and memorize long genealogies recited out loud in Dutch. Even modern terms like battery slip into the dialect, blending the old with the new. Through hymns, stories, proverbs, and school recitations, Amish kids build not just vocabulary but cultural identity. Every sentence they speak strengthens a bridge between two worlds, one rooted in tradition and the other constantly evolving. Number 8. Head math and barn ledgers. In an Amish child's world, numbers are more than schoolwork. They're essential tools for everyday life. By age 10, most Amish kids already have a grip on mental arithmetic that rivals grown adults. They learn by doing, calculating how many eggs are needed to meet a neighbor's order, subtracting feed costs from egg sales, or figuring out how many bales of hay are required to last through winter. They don't need calculators. Instead, they reduce fractions to adjust baking recipes, convert tablespoons to teaspoons when making herbal teas, or compute board feet of lumber needed for a chicken coop. Everything is memorized or estimated in the head because convenience isn't an option. They live off-grid, and practicality trumps perfection. They track simple ledgers on paper, dates, item names, prices, and quantities. A jar of honey sold for $6 minus the $1.50 it cost a jar and label becomes a basic profit lesson. But more than that, it's about consistency and tracking trends. Kids know how to calculate pasture stocking rates, how many goats can graze an acre without damaging it. They estimate seed needs by knowing row length, spacing, and days to maturity. And if you ask an Amish 10-year-old how many dozens of eggs their family's hens will produce next week, they'll give you a realistic estimate based on weather, feed, and laying cycles. When making yogurt, they know that 110 degrees Fahrenheit is the fermentation sweet spot, and they can gauge water temperature for yeast-based dough without a thermometer. They understand margins. If cucumbers sell for $1 each, but it took a week of watering, weeding, and picking, they learn to value effort as part of the cost. They convert pecks to bushels, ounces to pounds, and calculate how many quarts of canned tomatoes their family will need to last the winter. They mentally split wood piles by volume to see how many weeks of heating fuel remain. Even change-making at roadside stands is done without hesitation, rounding, estimating, and correcting quickly under pressure. Their math isn't abstract. It's baked into their chores, their cooking, their farming, and their faith. By 10, they know the difference between good math and bad math. One fills the pantry, the other leaves it empty. There's no gradebook for that, just the real-world consequences they understand instinctively. Number 9. Make your own toys and resourceful play. In the absence of screens, electronics, or aisles full of plastic toys, Amish children build their own worlds. Out of wood, corn husks, fabric scraps, and imagination. Their play is hands-on, physical, and resourceful. By 10, an Amish child may have carved their own willow whistle, built a functioning buggy from cotton spool wheels and scrapboards, or sewn a beanbag from leftover quilt fabric. They don't just entertain themselves, they develop fine motor skills, balance, design awareness, and social creativity, all while playing. Stick horses made from broom handles become prized possessions, raced across gravel driveways. Cornhusk dolls are braided, dressed, and sometimes even named after family members. In the barn, chalk circles scratched into wood become marble rings for impromptu tournaments. They make their own kites from feed sacks and string, learning wind dynamics in the process. Mud pies bake in sun-warmed tins, and snow forts transform into elaborate architectural projects with walls, lookouts, and rules. Winter brings indoor crafts, cat's cradle string games, hand-drawn checkerboards with walnut pieces, or ice skating with homemade skates fashioned from smooth beef bones. Every tool is dual purpose. Scrap lumber becomes blocks, rags become juggling balls, and even a fallen branch can become a sword, a cane, or a bridge in make-believe worlds. Rope swings on hayloft beams give flight, while foot scooters built from salvaged parts deliver speed with no batteries. Stilts crafted from 2x2 boards test balance and courage. A mason jar becomes a lantern when filled with fireflies. They turn slate chalkboards into hopscotch courts, or build tiny stores stocked with pebble money and carved wooden goods. Their pretend general stores teach early lessons in barter, negotiation, and counting. Stories told by lantern shadow puppets become bedtime theater. They act out barn-raising scenes with wooden pegs and blocks, practicing roles they'll one day hold for real. The value of play here isn't in its complexity, it's in its independence and creativity. No two toys are the same. Amish kids learn that fun doesn't come from packaging, it comes from ideas, effort, and making do with what you have. It's play that builds character, one handmade toy at a time. Number 10. Barn raising protocol and mutual aid. Barn raising is more than just an event in Amish life. It's the heartbeat of their mutual aid culture, and Amish children are introduced to its rhythms early. By the age of 10, they've helped in multiple raisings, not by lifting beams, but by organizing, preparing, and observing the principles that hold their community together. When a barn is lost to fire or a new family settles in, the bishop announces the date and the entire district prepares. Children help the day before, baking pies, peeling potatoes, washing dishes, and sorting wooden pegs by size into labeled baskets. Each tool is laid out with care, nails are counted by the pound, and safety rules are quietly reviewed. On the morning of the raise, children arrive in scarves that designate their group: runners, food servers, tool tenders. They refill water barrels every hour, carry sandwiches to the framing crew, and help keep toddlers entertained in quilt-lined playpens nearby. They observe men fitting mortise into tenon, hammering wooden pins in rhythm. Kids learn construction terms and structural principles not from books but from real-time commentary. They trace pulley ropes skyward, study geometry through bracing angles, and memorize how wood bends under weight. If a board is missing, they're sent running for more. Part delivery, part responsibility lesson. When lunch is served, the entire site pauses. Children help lay out plates, refill lemonade jugs, and wash dishes afterward, using the 3-basin method: soap, rinse, bleach. Hymns are sung before work resumes. They note who came, who stayed, and who brought what. They learn that attendance is a form of social credit, the kind that pays back when your own time of need comes. At sunset, as lanterns flicker and the frame stands tall, kids sweep the site, gather tools, and fold blankets. They've watched a barn rise in a day, and they've participated in something larger than themselves. Mutual aid isn't a phrase, they live it. It teaches them that strength isn't measured by how much you lift, but by how well you show up for others. Number 11. Fuel and fire mastery. Amish kids learn to respect fire from an early age. Not just because it warms their homes, but because it cooks their meals, heats their bathwater, and powers their iron stove. By 10, they've helped split wood, stack cords, start fires, and manage burn rates. It begins with tree knowledge, feeling the bark of ash, oak, or maple, and understanding which burns hottest, which smokes least, and which logs season fastest. They learn to stack wood in proper crisscross patterns to improve airflow and reduce mold. The rule is clear: wood must be dry, aged, and stacked high enough to last the winter. Each cord, 4x4 by 8 feet, is measured carefully. They chop kindling and collect fatwood, resin-soaked splinters, for reliable ignition. Fires are built top-down for cleaner combustion. Kids know how to rake coals, bank embers, and keep flames steady with minimal smoke. They monitor stovepipe thermometers, keeping it between 300 and 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Weekly, they sweep out ash and scrape creosote from chimneys. Wicks on kerosene lamps are trimmed to 1/4 inch to avoid blackened glass and soot buildup. Matches are stored with dry rice in jars to stay moisture-free, and lanterns are filled outside to prevent indoor spills. They know to dry wet mittens on the stove rail without scorching them, and to boil water in kettles nearby to keep humidity balanced. Fire isn't just a tool, it's a science. Dampers regulate oven heat for baking. Cast iron lids rotate to distribute it evenly. In spring, chimney caps are checked for bird nests, and ashes are repurposed into soap-making lye. Every part of the system has a job, from the tinderbox with birch bark to the sand bucket near the stove. Fire safety is non-negotiable. Kids practice what to do if clothes catch: stop, drop, roll. CO detectors exist, powered by hand crank alarms. A fire mishap isn't just dangerous, it can mean disaster. By mastering fire, Amish kids learn chemistry, engineering, responsibility, and respect. The message is clear: fire is a gift, but only if you treat it like a wild animal that lives inside your home. Number 12. Produce stand enterprise and cash on hand savvy. Amish children often get their first taste of entrepreneurship not from allowance or chores, but from a produce stand. By the time they're 10, many are helping run family stalls that operate entirely on the honor system. No staff, no registers, just a box for cash and a strong dose of trust. Stands are set up at dawn, stocked with tomatoes sorted by ripeness, cucumbers in bunches, zucchini bundled in discounts like 3 for $1, and berries arranged in pint baskets. A cigar box float contains $20 in change, and kids handle mental math with practiced ease. Every sale is logged by hand: date, item, quantity, and price. Some even record weather to see how it impacts foot traffic. IOUs from neighbors are written down, teaching responsibility and social trust. They rotate melons into shaded spots to prevent sunburn, mist greens to keep them fresh, and drape tables in burlap to create evaporative cooling. Crushed fruit is repacked, juiced, or turned into jam. Unsold produce gets canned, composted, or sent to the hog pen. Waste isn't tolerated. Impulse buys like jars of relish, handmade pot holders, or braided garlic ropes are placed strategically to boost revenue. Customers are greeted with smiles, and children learn sales language early. Clear, polite, never pushy. They learn when to mark down prices, how to handle difficult customers, and how to manage restocking based on traffic peaks, tracked on tick sheets or memory. Even marketing is considered. Colorful signs, flower boxes, and a friendly farm dog all improve curb appeal. Weekly profit tallies are compared against seed costs and supply lists for the next season. Kids understand the cycle: sell in summer, save for winter, reinvest in spring. And when there's extra, it's donated to elders, widows, or someone in need. In the Amish world, business isn't just about profit, it's about purpose. And kids learn early that honest work, fair pricing, and community care go hand in hand.